Hello everybody and welcome back for our last round of Swiss at EUIC. This is round number 12. This is, for all intents and purposes, an elimination round. If you win this round and you're on stream, that usually means that you are into top cut. If you are in this round on stream and you lose, that normally means that you are out of top cut. So we're going to go ahead and jump into this first game here. And notably, this is not something that you see very often. These are two Japanese players that are all the way over at EUIC. Japan qualifications for Worlds and Japan Nationals are always a little bit tricky, but see these players over here, it's always very, very exciting. So we have Tsukide over here with Miraidon, Whimsicott, Farigiraf, Urshifu, Ogerpon, Hearthflame, and Iron Hands. This is one of the first Ogerpon Hearthflames that we have seen on the stream. It is not that popular on stream compared to Cornerstone Mask, although I believe in terms of usage rates, it's the most popular overall. And this is the Focus Energy version. We've seen a couple of Focus Energy Ogerpons over the last few rounds of this tournament, and a Focus Energy plus Ivy Cudgel can result in a ton of damage. A very standard Farigiraf here with Foul Play, Helping Hand, Psychic, and Trick Room, as well as that Electric Seed to take advantage of Miraidon's Hadron engine. Once again, this is a super standard Miraidon. Again, it'll come down to, is this a faster Miraidon or a bulkier Miraidon? A lot of that's kind of pretty big in terms of the gameplay here. With that Farigiraf, you know, having Trick Room, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a slower Miraidon with some more bulk, and we've seen that come in pretty clutch with those slower Volt switches, allowing the person with the bulky Miraidon to get more information before they switch out for the turn. On the other side of things, we have Mao Harada. Ooh, wow, I got tongue twisted here. Mao Harada here, and this is a very similar team with a couple of key changes. The Calyrex is Shadow Rider Calyrex, Terra Fairy, Draining Kiss, and it does have Spell Tag, notably, as its damage boosting item. And then a Rocky Helmet Incineroar with Terra Poison, Parting Shot, Knockoff, Taunt, and Fake Out. Urshifu Rapid Strike here for Mao is a Focus Sash Terra Stellar Urshifu, and it does have Surging Strikes, Close Combat, Aqua Jet, and Detect. Again, Close Combat isn't something that we're seeing on every single Urshifu these days. That is something people might be able to take advantage of, but enough of them are still running Close Combat that you probably can't, you know, have a safe guess or come into a tournament expecting a low amount of close combat. And a lot of times it is paired with these Iron Hands that have Low Kick, Drain Punch, Heavy Slam, and Fake Out. It is AV Iron Hands. That's the most standard that we've seen. And it is Terra Fairy. Sometimes we see something like Terra Bug for the Iron Hands, but it's the Terra Fairy here. And then the Ogerpon Hearthflame here for Mao does not have the Focus Energy. It has the Helping Hand. Focus instead more on the supportive aspect of things. And for Mao here, the Whimsicott, both Whimsicotts are very, very standard. Moonblast, Tailwind, Light Screen, and Encore. And this one specifically is Terra Dark with Covert Cloak. A lot of these are very, very standard movesets. The most interesting thing, honestly, is the Calyrex with the Spell Tag. It is also a nasty plot, Calyrex. Sometimes we've seen a lot of people run with the Calyrex Shadow Rider opting to not run the Draining Kiss variant anymore. So this will also probably be a bulkier Calyrex Shadow Rider. So both these restricteds, who are known to be fast and hit really hard, will still hit pretty hard, but are probably more trained to be a little bit bulkier and not quite as speedy, which could make some of these speed tiers a little bit interesting, mainly with the Urshifus and the Ogerpon, since they're both very, very fast. So coming into game number one here, we have Miraidon and Whimsicott versus Ogerpon and Calyrex Shadow Rider. Calyrex Shadow Rider is already putting Draining Kiss pressure on this Miraidon, although Miraidon really, really does like Terrassalizing, going for Dazzling Gleam. That said, it's not going to do a ton here. Ogerpon Hearthflame does resist it, and it kind of gets a pretty free Focus Energy here. There is the threat potentially of Ko going for Encore, although I don't know if that is something that Mao super needs to worry about, as Mao can just throw up a Spiky Shield and make sure that this Whimsicott goes down with a 2-hit KO. Notably, Ko's Whimsicott is a Focus Sash Whimsicott. There's no Fake Out pressure on the field, so the Covert Cloak doesn't really matter all that much right now. But it won't go down to a single Astral Barrage if it is, or even to a single Ivy Cudgel if that is what comes through. We do see Ko go for the Terastallization here. It's pretty much required. And we see Mao not go for the Terastallization, but instead go for the Helping Hand. Whimsicott does get the Light Screen up. That is going to essentially offset the Helping Hand. So this should just be basically a neutral Astral Barrage here coming out. It's going to do a good chunk of damage to both Pokemon, but it won't take any KOs. It does a lot to the Whimsicott, but the Miraidon still feels pretty good about itself. We are going to see, I believe this is Dazzling Gleam come out. Yeah, Dazzling Gleam takes about half of Calyrex's HP. That definitely tells me that it's a bulky Calyrex. A non-bulky Calyrex at all would definitely take a lot more, probably down into the red. And Ogerpon doesn't really mind too much taking those Dazzling Gleams. But now, if you're Whimsicott, I don't know if you mind going for an Encore into that Ogerpon spot. because then it's not really doing any damage, right? Like, you can go for that helping hand, or like going for that helping hand isn't the worst thing in the world, because this Calyrex is now under pretty immense pressure. Calyrex is not going to be taking out the Miraidon here with basically any of its attacks, and Miraidon will take out the Calyrex with a Dazzling Gleam. Calyrex could go for a Protect, but then it's also susceptible to Encore here. Encore pressure with a Whimsicott is always very, very scary if you can't guarantee take it out very quickly. It is just going to be Tailwind, though, for Ko. Actually, I don't know if Ko has Encore on this Whimsicott, but I'll have to go back and look. But you always have to worry about it. Dazzling Gleam comes through. That does take down the Calyrex. We don't see a helping hand out of the Ogerpon. There's no point, as you know the Calyrex is going down. I imagine we're going to see an Ivy Cudgel here. Yeah, it's going into probably the Miraidon to get a lot of damage in, but the Miraidon stays alive at 8 HP. That is absolutely massive. Now, if you're Mao, if you brought Incineroar, Fake Out here is a pretty threatening thing for Ko to deal with. You don't really want that Miraidon to go down this early. And also Dazzling Gleam doesn't do a ton. Also Iron Hands with Fake Out does quite a bit. Notably, Iron Hands also having the Assault Vest here means that Dazzling Gleam, or if Ko can even bring back in the Miraidon and do something else later, means that that damage is not going to be all that scary. So Ko now has to figure out, like, okay, do I want to just let this Miraidon go down, try to get some other things set up with Whimsicott here? Actually, no. Okay, so Ko does have Encore there. And then just maybe try to get some more damage with this Whimsicott. Whimsicott will be the fastest thing on the field, but Whimsicott can also get hit with Fake Out. So this is where you have to start making some calls for both players. Is the Whimsicott going to stay in? Is the Whimsicott going to attack? Is the Miraidon going to stay in? And we see Ko go for the swap here, bring in the Urshifu Rapid Strike here. That puts a lot of pressure on the Ogerpon specifically. And Mao goes for the Terastallization here on the Iron Hands into the Terra Fairy. So it won't be taking a super effective Moonblast. Terra is a great neutral defensive Terra. Or Fairy is a great neutral defensive Terra, which we've seen so much of. We see the Spiky Shield out of the Ogerpon here. Although I don't know if that any damage was going into that spot. We get a Moonblast into the Iron Hands. It does a little bit, but with that Terastallization as well as the Assault Vest, it doesn't do anything crazy. And that is a ton of damage into the Urshifu. I mean, that, woo, if you are Ko, that is absolutely painful to deal with. And this Iron Hands now has pretty much free reign to do what it wants on the battlefield. It's not going down to a Surging Strikes. It's not going down to a close combat. And it doesn't really care about those Moonblasts. And honestly, if you're Ogerpon Hearthflame here, if you can just take damage away from that Iron Hands with the Terra Fairy, I mean, we've seen Iron Hands solo restricted Pokemon. Like, Iron Hands is just so strong, especially when you have Assault Vest against something like a Miraidon. Iron Hands just does so much work. But we see Mao want to save it, takes it back into the bag, and reveals Pokemon number 4 here. It is that Incineroar. The Intimidate is going to come through onto the Urshifu, which could be pretty big, but Surging Strikes doesn't really care about it one way or another. Now, again, we're going to be wondering about speed tiers here. I believe Tailwind goes down next turn, but we see the Surging Strikes come out. This is going to take down the Incineroar, but that will give Iron Hands in the back the opportunity to click Fake Out into it again, which, I mean, that should KO the Urshifu. Also, Ogerpon notably not going for Protect here. It's going to be able to take a KO into either of these Pokemon, but actually the Urshifu knocks itself out to the Rocky Helmet. I wasn't even looking at it. The Incineroar even manages to stay alive. A phenomenal switch from Mao, and takes down the Whimsicott as well. That leaves Ko with 2 Pokemon in the bag, but this Incineroar, even though it's low, has the opportunity to click the Fake Out button into the Miraidon, which cannot be avoided. That is great play from Mao. I absolutely should have caught on to that earlier. Yeah, this Rocky Helmet Incineroar, man. Urshifu loves going for those Surging Strikes into that spot, but Rocky Helmet just does so much work. Rocky Helmet on Incineroar, Rocky Helmet on a Moongus, on any of those redirectors, it does so much recoil chip damage back. When you're low like that, it is always risky to try to pick those targets. So I imagine we'll see a Dazzling Gleam. Dazzling Gleam here could potentially knock out both Pokemon if Miraidon for some reason isn't hit with a Fake Out. But I imagine that is going to be the option. If you're Ogerpon here, you kind of have to make a tough choice on who you want to KO. Do you want to get rid of the Incineroar, or do you want to get rid of the opposing Ogerpon? If you get rid of the opposing Ogerpon, there's less damage overall on the field, but you're still going to have to contend with an Iron Hands in the back one way or another, and that Pokemon is just so strong. Mao goes ahead, use Spiky Shield on his own Ogerpon Hearth Flame here, and we see the Fake Out come through onto the Miraidon. That should just about wrap it up here. Ko does have an opportunity to try to get some damage in, and we have seen Ogerpon Hearth Flame 1v1 Iron Hands in the past. Notably, I do believe also that Electric Terrain should... I actually was not paying attention to see if Electric Terrain got set back up or if it's going to be fading on this turn. We'll have to see here. If it does fade, that will be pretty notable, but okay, that's exactly what happened. So Electric Terrain is down. That does give Ko a little bit of a better opportunity. This isn't unwinnable, but it's very, very difficult. At the very least, Ko would have to take Rocky Helmet damage from the Incineroar. And likely, I wouldn't be surprised if we would see a parting shot out of the Incineroar if Ko does not take it out this turn. Ivy Cudgel is also going to be doing quite a bit of damage from the opposing Ogerpon. So Ko's in a really tough spot here. You don't want to take a parting shot, but you also can't really afford to take damage from this Ogerpon on the other side. So Ko goes for the attack on the opposing Ogerpon Hearth Flame, takes it down. I wouldn't be surprised if we see... and quite frankly, any move here. It is that parting shot, so Ko is kind of going to have to rely on critical hits here, which Ko does have focus energy, but I think that might be a little bit too early to make it work. So in comes the Iron Hands. Ko can just go for Spiky Shield here. There's not too much of a reason not to. And then we'll have to see how things end up playing out. Heavy Slam, Low Kick, Drain Punch. Drain Punch is the big thing that you have to worry about here. With that Intimidate bringing Ko down to -2, I mean, you literally have to get a critical hit here, and there is no other real option. There are 2 Fake Outs on the field. You're going to go ahead and click Spiky Shield. One of these Pokemon is probably going to click Fake Out. It is the safer option, but it's both moves are going to go into the Protect either way, and it's not going to matter all that much. So Protect comes through, or the Spiky Shield comes through. It doesn't look like either of these, or it looks like the Iron Hands is the one that took a little bit of chip damage. I imagine the Incineroar went for a parting shot, and the Iron Hands is the one that went for the Fake Out. Iron Hands can afford to. Now, Ko, you're looking for a critical hit here. You're not really worried about the Incineroar. You're going to have to get a critical hit on this Iron Hands, and you did not. Are you going to be able to do it with 2 attacks? We see the knockoff come through. It's not going to be able to knock off the mask, and we see the Drain Punch come out. I think that is essentially going to even up the damage that the Iron Hands took. Yeah, in fact, I think the Iron Hands got a little bit of extra HP. So again, Ko looking for a critical hit here. If Ko can get a critical hit, that might just be the game. If Ko can't, then that is GG for Mao here. Ivy Cudgel comes through. There's a pretty high crit chance and does not get it. So with that knockoff combined with the Drain Punch, that will be it for Ogerpon. And Mao Harada takes game number 1. Overall, this was a pretty exciting game. We like to see some of that back and forth here, and neither of these players had a huge advantage up until Iron Hands hits the field. Iron Hands is just such a strong Pokemon. Also, I do have a blanket on because it's a little bit chilly in my apartment. Sorry to interrupt. Iron Hands is just such a strong Pokemon. It really does feel like a second restricted, especially when you can have, especially when you have Electric Terrain set up. Like, it's just crazy. And I mean, going into a potential double restricted meta later, and it's crazy. But going into game number 2, I'm interested to see if Ko wants to make any adjustments or any changes, or if Ko just wants to stick with what they have and maybe try to make some better calls with that Urshifu, hopefully not make it come in and take a ton of damage off the rip, because I think that really could be a win condition for Ko. So that being said, let's go ahead and get into game number 2 here. We see the same lead for Ko, but we see Mao change it up a little bit. It is now Incineroar and Calyrex Shadow Rider on the field instead of Ogerpon Hearth Flame. Now, Fake Out pressure alive, and well, there is technically the threat of Farigiraf coming in for Ko if you are Mao, so you might not want to Fake Out. Excuse me. But we didn't see the Farigiraf in the previous game. I don't know if we are going to see it on this one. So Whimsicott could very well still click Tailwind or Light Screen here. If you click the Light Screen, I don't think you're feeling too bad about yourself, but we saw that immediate terrestrialization from Ko in the previous game. I imagine we might want to see it again here. Draining Kiss would do quite a bit of damage, but you could also make the call. Mao went for Astral Barrage last turn. Helping Hand Astral Barrage into Light Screen did a decent chunk of damage, but there's no Helping Hand on this turn, so I'm pretty sure Mao is going to want to change it up. And if you can fake out Draining Kiss into that Miraidon slot pretty free, then I'm not sure you wouldn't want to. We do see fake out into the Miraidon. We don't see a terrestrialization from either side here. The Light Screen does come out. I don't know if Mao's going to go for the Draining Kiss without terrestrializing. And it is the nasty plot instead. So, +2 on that Shadow Rider Calyrex. Now, we do know that it is slower than the Miraidon, even outside of... Or actually, we don't know that it's slower than the Miraidon, because... Actually, no, yes we do, because Whimsicott set up Light Screen first in the previous game, and Miraidon got the Dazzling Gleam off before the Shadow Rider got off its Astral Barrage. So that is going to be pretty big, and now Ko has the opportunity here to go for a Volt Switch, potentially, either into the Incineroar or into the Shadow Rider Calyrex, get this Miraidon off the field, and save it for a rainy day. Now, Whimsicott does have the Light Screen up, which feels pretty good, but what is it going to do now? It can't Encore the Incineroar. Incineroar is a Dark type. Whimsicott has the Prankster ability. You could Encore the Shadow Rider Calyrex. That would honestly be pretty darn funny, but it goes for the Protect. So a defensive option here after getting that damage boost. And Ko makes a pretty good call here. Gets the Moonblast into the Incineroar, as well as the Volt Switch that takes Incineroar out, and that's going to give Ko a clean switch in for whatever Ko wants. Honestly, I'm not sure you wouldn't just want to leave the Miraidon in at this point, although I guess Mao could bring in the Iron Hands and have another fake out ready. Urshifu, I feel like, is less of a risk. You already have the Incineroar out, so that Rocky Helmet is no longer a threat for any Surging Strikes that want to come out, but you do also have Ogerpon Hearthflame that you could bring in. Ogerpon Hearthflame has quite a bit of damage. You do have the Focus Energy opportunity for Ogerpon here, and with the Light Screen set up, you might feel pretty good about it if you are Ko to get that Focus Energy and then start laying down some critical hit Ivy Cudgels. Either one of them, I wouldn't be too surprised if Ko brings in, but it looks like it is going to be that Urshifu Rapid Strike. Again, no Rocky Helmet or Intimidate to contend with here. This Urshifu is going to be feeling pretty darn good about itself. Whimsicott does have the opportunity to go for Encore onto the Shadow Rider Calyrex here, but Ogerpon is on the field now for Mao. So, Encore a threat all the time, basically, for this Whimsicott now. Mao is going to be picking either supportive options or defensive options for one of these two Pokemon. I wouldn't be surprised if Ogerpon goes for a Helping Hand, but we will have to see what Ko wants to go for here. It is the Tailwind instead of another trapping type move. Urshifu, I don't know if it's faster than either of these Pokemon. Again, bulky Pokemon have kind of been the norm recently, so that players can go for dual speed modes, but we do see Ko go for the terrestrialization here on the Urshifu, so it is going to be a water type Urshifu here. It won't take super effective damage from a Psychic or anything along those lines, and we see the Follow Me come out of the Ogerpon Hearthflame, so Surging Strikes here should guaranteed take it out, and it should not be particularly close. We see the Tailwind come through for the Whimsicott here. Surging Strikes is going to do quite a bit of damage. Like I said, it'll actually just outright KO. We already know that. We could see the Astral Barrage here from the Shadow Rider Calyrex into the Light Screen. That +2 isn't going to be as crazy, but it's still going to be pretty much not GG's, but a pretty much one shot into the Urshifu. I wouldn't be surprised. So Mao, I'm interested to see what exactly Mao does click here. And it is going to be that, okay, it is going to be that Astral Barrage. This should be bring Whimsicott down to Sash and do most damage to the Urshifu. It brings them both down to 1 HP. That is very, very good for Ko Tsukide here. That Whimsicott is the only one with the Focus Sash. Mind you, Urshifu going to 1 HP is absolutely massive. It's still going to be the fastest Pokemon on the field here. Even if Mao brings in Iron Hands, this Pokemon has Detect. Yeah, Iron Hands comes in. Urshifu does have Detect. I mean, this is going to be a very, very advantageous position for Ko here. While both Pokemon are on 1 HP, Ko does still have 2 Pokemon on the battlefield, both of which are going to be faster than Mao's. Now, Whimsicott, I don't know if Whimsicott certainly is not going to survive this turn. We're going to see Astral Barrage here, I'm quite certain. If you are Iron Hands, I don't know if you go for Fake. I don't know which Pokemon you go for Fake Out into. It's pretty much guaranteed that this Urshifu is going to detect, or at least there's a pretty big threat of detect. Like if you fake out into the detect, you don't really mind, but then you miss out on dealing damage to the Whimsicott, taking it out before it can do any Moonblast chip. But at the same time, this Urshifu, it doesn't have to detect. It can go for Aqua Jet, get some damage in. Ko is in a position where they can sacrifice a Pokemon or two here. But we do see the detect come out. The fake out goes into the Whimsicott. Players make pretty safe reads all around. Now, Calyrex here, doesn't really matter what it clicks. Honestly, if it went for a nasty plot here, that would be pretty sweet. But that is not what we see. And instead, it's just another Astral Barrage. Now, there is, I believe, one more turn of Tailwind. Actually, no, it wasn't set up on the first turn of the game. So there should be 2 more turns of Tailwind for Ko here, which means that both Ogerpon and Miraidon are going to be outspeeding both of Mao's Pokemon, essentially no matter what. Notably, Mao has not terastallized yet, so either of these Pokemon could go for their terastallization. I don't necessarily know if they want to. I don't necessarily know if it matters. Iron Hands could go for it. It'll make itself a little bit bulkier in the face of Dazzling Gleam. But I'm also not certain that that's what you want to do. If you can try to get Draining Kisses off with the Shadow Rider Calyrex, maybe there's a world where you can make it happen. This Miraidon can't terastallize out of the Fairy type weakness. But at the same time, I think this might just be too much damage present on the board right now for Ko. We see the Protect come through from the Shadow Rider Calyrex. No terastallization for Mao here. Surging Strikes would go through Protect if that is who Ko is trying to target down, but it looks like the Miraidon's attack is going to be the one that gets blocked first, and it looks like that's a critical hit on the Iron Hands. That could be pretty big here. I don't know if Surging Strikes would have taken out the Iron Hands, but it is going to do a lot of damage to the Shadow Rider Calyrex. In fact, it looks like it's just going to take it out outright, even though it's definitely a little bit on the bulkier side. Down goes the Shadow Rider Calyrex. It's an Iron Hands versus the world. We've seen it do a lot before, but this Drain Punch, which I imagine is what we're going to see here, is not going to have a very, very great time into the 1 HP Urshifu, which is the primary threat. But now with Dazzling Gleam locked in for this Miraidon, and we already have seen what Ko's Pokemon is in the back, at least on our side of things, it is going to be that Ogerpon Hearthflame. With the redirection, with the option to click Spiky Shield and Ivy Cudgel, this time the Ogerpon likes its odds. It has a friend now instead of the Iron Hands having a friend. Ooh, had to get some water. So, just taking some time to think. Doesn't really, right now, obviously Ogerpon Hearthflame is the only Pokemon that can come in. But when you're in a situation like this, you're going to win your second game. You're going to start thinking about, okay, what are we going to do for game number 3? Ko had this game in the bag, right? This was a pretty dominant game number 2. Game number 1 was a little bit more back and forth, but for both players, this is an opportunity to sit, think about, okay, what leads are we going to bring in? Both players brought the same 4, just in a different order for Mao here. So the question becomes, what adaptations is Mao going to make, and how does Ko wants to answer that? Does Ko want to bring in the Trick Room mode here? Does Ko want to try to underspeed things? But the problem with that is, while Farigiraf Armor Tail is great in blocking the fake out from Iron Hands and Incineroar, it doesn't want to face down an Incineroar, and it doesn't really want to set up Trick Room for Iron Hands. Iron Hands is already an incredible threat. Giving it a speed advantage does not sound very good if you are Ko. That said, you could bring in your own Iron Hands. You have the option too, but at the same time, it's a little bit risky. So Ko has their last 2 Pokemon on the field. This is, like I said, this is pretty much guaranteed to go to game number 3 here. I love Iron Hands. It's a second restricted, but I simply cannot win against this duo. So if you're Mao, this game, losing the Incineroar is huge, right? That play where Mao was able to switch in the Incineroar and get the Urshifu to KO itself with Rocky Helmet was a pivotal moment in game number 1. I'm not necessarily going to say that it swung it from being in Ko's favor to Mao's favor, but it definitely got Mao's win percentage much, much higher. So maybe trying to save the Incineroar is going to be big for game number 3, figuring out ways to pivot it in and out, make sure that it stays alive. I think that's definitely going to be pretty big here. We see the Dazzling Gleam come through. Even with the Terra Fairy, it takes out the Iron Hands, and that is going to send us to game number 3. So We've already talked a little bit about the adaptations that both players can make, so we're not going to stay too long in the middle here. But just a reminder, this is in the middle of the day on day number 2, and this is the last round before top cut. These players are both very, very good, and they have absolutely practiced these matchups a lot. Shadow Rider and Miraidon are both very, very popular restricteds, so I'm very interested to see what their prep is going into game number 3 and how they have chosen to adapt. All right, so Mao brings in the same two. Ko is the one that changes up the lead into Ogerpon, Hearthflame, and Miraidon up against Mao's Shadow Rider and Incineroar. Notably, Ko is not going for the speed control off the bat. Intimidate on the Ogerpon is pretty big. This is not a helping hand Ogerpon. It is a focus energy Ogerpon. That could still come into play here, but I doubt that that is what Ko was envisioning with this Ogerpon on the battlefield. Ogerpon also takes recoil damage from from Incineroar's Rocky Helmet if it tries to go for Ivy Cudgels. We do know that a little bit of chip damage onto the Incineroar as well as Volt Switch will take it out, but Mao has not yet gone for the Terra Fairy Draining Kiss. If you're Mao, you haven't gone for it 2 games in a row, this might be the game to break it out. You can't get hit with Fake Out here. You're not going to be going, you're almost not guaranteed to not be going down here. And Mao wants to save the Incineroar. Takes the Incineroar out, brings in Iron Hands, brings in Ogerpon of their own. I was going to try to guess there. So Ogerpon versus Ogerpon on the battlefield now, and we see the Calyrex go for the Protect. No nasty plot here, keeping itself alive. We see Volt Switch once again for the Miraidon here, getting the Miraidon out of dodge as well, and doing a decent chunk to the opposing Ogerpon for Ko. And we got a little hint here. We see that Farigiraf in the back for Ko. Now, that's going to be the big question here. What else does Mao have? And is this Farigiraf going to be able to come in clutch? Ko is thinking things through here, and honestly, I would as well. You don't have speed control right now. You don't necessarily know if your Urshifu is going to be faster than either of these Pokemon. You also don't know where your Ogerpon stands in regards to that. So it's a little bit risky to not go for the Tailwind mode when you already know how you can get speed advantage and have some pretty controlled speed tiers. When you have this Farigiraf and you aren't exactly sure of who outspeeds whom, that's going to be pretty dangerous. So we do see Ko go ahead, bring in the Farigiraf that is going to trigger the Electric Seed and up its special defense. It's also immune to Astral Barrage here, which Ko doesn't necessarily mind. Now, both Ogerpons are on the field. We do see the Focus Energy come out now for Ko's Ogerpon. That is pretty big. And now Ko is in a pretty solid spot. Focus Energy Ogerpon does a lot of damage. It will have to contend with a potential Follow Me out of the opposing Ogerpon, and notably there is no light screen set up. Ogerpon could go for, Ko's Ogerpon could go for Spiky Shield here as well as Trick Room. If Ko has a minimum speed Ogerpon, that could be something that you are ready for. But at the same time, you don't know where Mao's is. Mao does not have a Trick Room mode on his team, at least ingrained, but you could be prepped for it by having a slower Ogerpon as well as that Iron Hands. So, Mao, I wouldn't necessarily say is under huge threat here. This is a good spot to go for a nasty plot if you so choose. We do see the Follow Me come out for that initial Ogerpon, and the Astral Barrage is what comes out instead. Getting some damage on to the opposing Ogerpon here. It takes Ko's Ogerpon down to below half HP, but the Ivy Cudgel is going to come out. It's going to be a guaranteed critical hit, essentially, and it takes down Mao's Ogerpon. But this Calyrex is still going to be on the field for the time being. There is the Trick Room from the Farigiraf. So, this is Ogerpon now has Focus Energy set up, and it should be the fastest thing on the field, other than potentially if Mao switches in an Incineroar or an Iron Hands. Now, Incineroar and Iron Hands cannot go for Fake Out thanks to this Farigiraf being on the field. However, that doesn't mean that they won't underspeed the Ogerpon and just KO it with Knockoff or Drain Punch or anything along those lines. That said, we don't know what Mao's 4th Pokemon is. If you are Mao, maybe the thought process of bringing Iron Hands in the first 2 games was, okay, Ko has a Trick Room mode, Ko's going to bring a Trick Room mode and set it up, so let's bring Iron Hands to do well in Trick Room. If you're in game number 3 now, you haven't seen Trick Room in 2 games, you might think, all right, let's not bring the Iron Hands, let's avoid Trick Room. But, all right, now Iron Hands just comes in. What am I saying? I was just trying to, make things exciting here. I'll be honest. Iron Hands is just a good Pokemon. You're going to bring it no matter what. and it's also probably going to be the slowest thing on the field no matter what. So Farigiraf is on the board, which makes Fake Out completely irrelevant. However, that doesn't mean Iron Hands is completely neutered. It can still do a ton of damage, and this is the kind of the spot that I was talking about in the previous game. Iron Hands is in Trick Room. This is where it thrives. It has electric terrain set up, it has Trick Room set up for it, and Mao didn't even have to do any of that. Iron Hands without those things is incredibly strong. Iron Hands with both of those things is absolutely oppressive. Focus Energy here feels great for the Ogerpon, right? You like having that setup. You were able to get one KO, but now you're up against an Iron Hands who is in its environment. You're not going to be able to move before it as the Ogerpon. So we see Ko switch out here, bring the Miraidon back in. That's pretty funny. The Iron Hands finger blocking the Miraidon camera. That's pretty darn good. And we see Mao switch out the Shadow Rider. This is going to be the Incineroar coming back in. So Fake Out pressure is back on board. I'm interested if Mao decided to click Fake Out, try to make a big call here. We see the Spiky Shield come out for the Ogerpon Hearth Flame. What is the play? So the Iron Hands did attack into the Ogerpon. That's going to be a little bit of Spiky Shield damage, but I'm going to be honest, if you're Iron Hands, you don't mind that all too much. And now Incineroar has the opportunity to click Fake Out. You can Fake Out into the Miraidon, and you can attack into the Ogerpon Hearth Flame. The Ogerpon Hearth Flame is going to go down, and the Miraidon wouldn't be able to attack this turn. Mao, if I'm Mao, I'm feeling like I'm in a really, really good spot here. I have the speed advantage. I have an incredibly powerful Pokemon here, and I still have my Restricted in the back that's at full HP. We don't have Nasty Plot up. There's no KOs taken yet for Mao, but this still feels really, really good. The Farigiraf's Electric Seed was already consumed, and that special defense boost is going to be gone. Ko needs to find an advantage here quickly. You already have taken one Pokemon down, but this Iron Hands is a just black hole of pressure. We see a double Spiky Shield from Ko here. That is absolutely massive, actually. We do see, I believe that's a Fake Out going into the Ogerpon spot here. Or no, that's just the Iron Hands attacking. So it looks like the Iron Hands and the Incineroar both went for an attack. The knockoff is going to go into the Miraidon here. But the Iron Hands taking additional Spiky Shield damage could be pretty big. We see a Volt Switch into the Incineroar, taking it down to half HP. Ko gets to swap out back into what I imagine might be the Farigiraf again. But certainly doesn't have to be. But, I mean, if I'm Ko, I might be wondering, I might be thinking I didn't expect to get this far. I fully would have expected the Fake Out into the Miraidon here, but the knockoff is pretty big. The Choice Specs does a lot for Miraidon's damage output. With the Hadron Engine and Electric Terrain, though, it is still going to hit pretty hard, just not quite as hard. Like, we're not going to see as much of that crazy damage. Now, that said, Volt Switch still did take Incineroar down to half HP without the Choice Specs. So that's still quite a lot of damage. And now there's no more Fake Out pressure on the field for Mao. Trick Room still has 3 turns that it's going to be up. I mean, you can only Spiky Shield so many times with this Ogerpon if you are Ko. That said, you're now in a position where Surging Strikes from the Urshifu plus Ivy Cudgel from the Iron Hands, or plus Ivy Cudgel from the Ogerpon into the Iron Hands could potentially do enough damage both to take out the Iron Hands. There's no Fake Out pressure, and I do not believe that Mao has the opportunity to KO both of these Pokemon in one turn. Even with the Parting Shot here, both the Urshifu and the Ogerpon are going to be doing critical hits, so they will not care about any potential stat drops. This is an opportunity for Ko to take out the Iron Hands. Likely will have to lose a Pokemon in the process. Okay, Drain Punch comes through onto the Urshifu here and does not take it out. A knockoff potentially could do it from the Incineroar here. Comes in, does not actually do enough damage, not nearly so. I don't know if Ivy Cudgel or Surging Strikes. Yeah, okay. The combination of the two looks like it probably should take out the Iron Hands here. Also, notably, we haven't seen Terrestrialization here out of Ko. This Ivy Cudgel is going to take out the Iron Hands here. And with the Iron Hands going down, things I think very, very assuredly switch into Ko's favor. It's 4 Pokemon versus 2. Trick Room is still going to be up for a couple of turns. That means that this Ogerpon is going to be able to do quite a bit of damage. Mystic Water coming off the Urshifu isn't that big of a deal. I don't know if it's going to be able to KO Incineroar from this range. Actually, it probably should, but it might take itself out in the process. That said, I think you're pretty comfortable with that. If you are Co, make a pretty clean sacrifice play if you need to, or just try to get that Surging Strikes into the Shadow Rider Calyrex spot, which, again, without the Mystic Water, I don't know if it's a guaranteed KO, but it's still going to do a heck of a lot of damage. And you can also Surging Strikes through Protect, which you don't mind too much. And the Incineroar is going to have a pretty tough call here. I mean, it's going to have to just keep going for knockoffs. It needs to get damage out. Parting Shot doesn't do anything against either of these Pokemon here. And knockoff into Urshifu doesn't really do anything, as we saw previously. So Taunt as well. Focus Energy has already been used by the Ogerpon. You could go for Taunt into the Ogerpon if you potentially want to stop Spiky Shields, but I don't know if that matters at the end of the day. We do see Co going for the Terastallization here. I believe it's going to be the Terra Water Urshifu is what we saw. Yes, that's exactly what we saw. And if you're Mao, Mao hasn't clicked to the Terastallization button yet this game. I don't know if you necessarily want to. Again, trying to go for Draining Kiss here could be pretty big. Instead, we see the Protect, maybe trying to take a bit of a gamble, but I'm pretty sure that the Surging Strikes is going to be going into that slot. The Taunt comes through. Urshifu isn't going to be able to detect anymore if it so chooses. Mao trying to find, maybe capitalize on if Co is trying to make a wild call, try to cover for any potential mistakes that Co can make to give Mao the best possible chance of winning. This does make, so without the Mystic Water, Shadow Rider Calyrex does survive this turn. But if you're Co, I think you can make a pretty safe call where, so Co does just double up into the Shadow Rider Calyrex. This Incineroar can't win the game on its own. We already know that the Miraidon Volt Switch will take it out on a second shot. So going for that double up isn't the worst thing in the world. You could also just make the call that Shadow Rider, even if it goes for Astral Barrage here to try to take down two Pokemon, that you have the Farigiraf in the back, and Farigiraf probably wins the 1v1 versus the Shadow Rider Calyrex. But at the end of the day, going for the double up there, getting the opportunity, when you have the chance to potentially take down the Shadow Rider, you can certainly go for it. Farigiraf comes on to the battlefield here. Notably, Farigiraf usually probably isn't going to be winning a 1v1 versus the Incineroar here. We see the Aqua Jet come out of the Urshifu and take down the Shadow Rider Calyrex, and it's a weakened Incineroar in a 4v1, and its only attacking move is knockoff. We see Mao stand up, extend the hand here. Urshifu does go down to the Incineroar's knockoff finally, but even with that win, Co still has 3 Pokemon in the back, notably that Miraidon that does a ton of damage, and that is going to be all she wrote. With the Electric Terrain coming back up as well, that Hadron Engine is going to trigger, and all that needs to happen is a single Volt Switch, a single Electro Drift into that spot, the helping hand here, and we see Mao cancels the battle. And Co Tsukide is moving on to Top Cut, your winner in round number 12 of EUIC VGC action. Game 1 was tight, and then Co had a very dominant game 2 into a pretty close game 3. It was not an easy game 3, I would say, at all, but Co was able to maneuver his Pokemon into a position where that Iron Hands was going to be going down basically no matter what. There was no way that Mao was going to be able to take 2 KOs on that turn, and especially not with that Incineroar with only move being knockoff that can do any damage. I know knockoff has been getting a lot more, just the solo knockoff for the damage on the Incineroar has been getting a lot more popular, but man, Flare Blitz does a lot of work. Until next time we're going to be looking at Top Cut finally. Super, super exciting. These are going to be the single elimination matches, and then we're getting pretty close to that grand finals that everyone was talking about just a couple weeks ago. So until next time, y'all, be safe, be smart, make wise decisions, and farewell.